Donald Trump has issued the harshest trade ultimatum in U.S. Canada history. It wasn't a mild warning or an opportunity for negotiation. It was a direct, non-negotiable demand. The President of the United States told one of its oldest and closest allies, a nation sharing the world's longest peaceful border, to comply completely or face total economic destruction. Mark Carney, Canada's recently elected Prime Minister and an experienced economist who guided major central banks through two of the most severe global financial crises in recent memory, didn't flinch. He refused to yield, not even for a moment. The unfolding events over the next 72 hours should raise alarm for every American who values constitutional order, economic stability, and the sanctity of international agreements. This confrontation is far more significant than just tariffs. It raises a fundamental question. Does the United States truly honor the agreements it enters into? Can a sitting president simply dismantle a trade deal he personally crafted and celebrated without any lasting consequences? When a leader of a G7 country declares a previously agreed-upon bilateral framework obsolete, it signals a deep, irreversible shift in North American relations. The roots of this crisis can be traced back to December 2025 when Trump publicly floated the idea of Canada becoming the 51st state. Initially, Canadian officials dismissed these comments as exaggerated rhetoric. However, unease started to grow as U.S. diplomats subtly urged Ottawa not to publicly reject the idea. By mid-January, diplomatic channels had noticeably cooled. The crisis officially ignited on February 17, 2026, during a White House briefing. A senior economic advisor revealed the tariff plan in unfiltered terms to journalists. Reports from the Globe and Mail and the Washington Post exposed how the U.S. administration framed Canada's resistance to sovereignty-related issues as a political challenge that required an economic response. A leaked briefing summary, containing deliberately provocative language, reached Ottawa within 48 hours. This was not just about correcting trade imbalances, it was about enforcing submission. Carney's team recognized the gravity of the situation immediately. On February 19th, Carney and his team held a 6-hour scenario planning session at Langevin Block, located near the House of Commons and the Prime Minister's office. This session involved top officials such as the Finance Minister, the Governor of the Bank of Canada, senior trade officials, and former senior IMF leaders who had worked with Carney. This wasn't an ad hoc reaction, but rather the activation of a pre-existing contingency plan that had been carefully developed over weeks. On February 24, 2026, shortly after Trump's Truth Social post, Carney's chief of staff reached out to the already awake Prime Minister at about 6:15 a.m. A government insider confirmed that the message aligned perfectly with the anticipated scenarios. Within the hour, Carney called a cabinet session. The consensus was clear. Canada had to respond quickly, with a robust economic countermeasure that would not only address Washington's demands, but also send a clear global message. Canada would act offensively, not defensively. By 7:45 a.m., Reuters reported that Canadian trade lawyers were already drafting complaints for a USMCA dispute. By 9 a.m., the Canadian Embassy in Washington had briefed 22 Senate offices from states heavily reliant on Canadian trade about the likely economic consequences, even before Carney made his public remarks. At 11 a.m. Eastern, Mark Carney faced cameras at Rideau Cottage in Ottawa. Without a teleprompter or notes, he appeared ready for this exact confrontation. Carney spoke plainly. The United States has presented an ultimatum. Canada does not accept ultimatums. We are a sovereign country, a NATO founder, a treaty ally, and the partner in the most significant trading relationship either nation possesses. The room in Ottawa went silent. Carney continued. Today, Canada begins a thorough review of export permits for critical minerals to the United States, including cobalt, lithium, and rare earth elements, which are essential for American defense industries. We are also applying immediate reciprocal 35% tariffs on American consumer goods. Furthermore, we are invoking Chapter 31 of the USMCA to challenge the legality of these tariffs through international dispute mechanisms. Carney paused for a moment before adding, "The United States will see that threats against Canada yield real consequences." That statement, "Canada has consequences," quickly spread through Washington. Markets reacted instantly. Automakers that depend on Canadian parts saw their shares drop by 3.7% in the first trading hour. Energy stocks in the Midwest declined, and by noon, the S&P 500 had dropped by 94 points. This was not the first time U.S. presidents have tested economic pressure on allies, only to face determined pushback. Reagan's semiconductor tariffs on Japan in 1980 triggered retaliatory actions, which eventually led to a negotiated resolution after some alliance damage. Reagan learned the hard way that economic partners must be treated as equals, not subordinates. In 2002, Bush's steel tariffs were met with retaliation from the EU, Canada, and Japan. After a WTO ruling, Bush reversed course within 19 months. What makes this situation different is that Trump's February 24th move relied on political leverage within a treaty he personally negotiated and hailed as the best trade agreement ever, the USMCA. The USMCA has strict procedures for tariff changes, and legal experts argue that the action circumvented those rules. Jonathan Freed, former Canadian ambassador to the WTO, explained that this situation is unprecedented, with a treaty signatory using emergency tariff authority in a way that the agreement was designed to prevent. Carney's team understood this shift and took immediate action. By invoking Chapter 31, Canada ensured the dispute would be handled in an international arena outside of U.S. domestic control. The Trump administration now faces a dilemma. If Trump yields or negotiates, it would be seen as a failure of the economic narrative he has sold to his supporters. If he proceeds with the 35% tariffs, the damage will be self-inflicted, leading to Canadian consumer tariffs, restricted exports of critical minerals, lengthy international litigation, and potential investor flight from integrated North American industries. This moment is a defining test for North American relations. The next few weeks will determine whether U.S. Canada ties can recover before permanently altering the continent's trade and security foundations.